Welcome to the show.
Joe, thank you for the invitation. It sounds going to be interesting, this. Yeah, love it. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Man, so I just wanted to kick us off, and please, I hope that I'm not overstepping my mark here. But if anyone does although you certainly don't look it, a quick Google search, you are 87, you're the co-founder of Reebok. The company was sold, but if you don't mind me obviously revealing your age, I would love to know at your age, most people, they just want a quiet retirement, go and play golf in the Celtic Manor, but you've been busy, you've written a fantastic book. What motivated you to write that?
Well, I mean, I actually retired from Reebok, from a full-time job at the end of 1989, which is a long time ago. And I decided, yes, well, let's take some time off. Of course, I thought I'd retired, but the phone never stopped ringing. There was always somebody had a question. Joe, what happened with this? When did this happen? So I've been continuously talking to Reebok, of being part of whatever they're doing, but I really sort of thought, well, now's the time just to sit back, let somebody else have the day job, and enjoy the sunshine in Tenerife, which I did. It was nice. Yeah, relax, whatever. It took a bit to get over the where's the next air ticket. Yeah, I mean, I was flying around the world 3 times a year, so I was at 35,000 feet for so much, and eventually when I decided I better get off, that was it. But that was, it's like a drug. It's like, what am I doing here in Tenerife? Where's the next ticket? So for a while, but it didn't take too long to get over that. But what I did do is we now had computers, and we started to get mobile phones or cell phones, and I'm reading Wikipedia, I'm reading Google, and they're telling me how Reebok started. There's also a photograph of Joe Foster, founder of Reebok. No, I'm right. I don't know who. It might have been Joe Foster. He certainly wasn't me. So I don't know. So we started this. We changed our name. We did all sorts of stories. So I thought maybe it's time. Maybe it's time I wrote it all down and let everybody know this is how Reebok started, and in fact how the Foster family were involved in sports footwear, athletic shoes from way back 1895. So that's what prompted me to write a book.
And I have to say, I've been reading it, and it's, almost like a roller coaster for me going through the book. Some of it is pretty bonkers. So I wonder if you just mentioned your family business, but I wonder if you could take us back to the early days where you grew up and really the family business that you were involved in at the start.
Well, had my grandfather been born probably when I was born, and his genius, he used his genius the way he did back in 1895. I mean, it would have been incredible, absolutely incredible. I think we did okay with Reebok. We did
just a little
bit. We did get to number 1 eventually, but in 1895 he invented the spike running shoe, which was quite a thing in those days. And where did he get his idea from? Well, that was from his grandfather. Would you believe? His grandfather was a cobbler, and he was a cobbler down in Nottingham, and he used to repair street shoes, but also cricket boots. And cricket boots had spikes in the bottom. So this obviously gave my grandfather a bit of a thought. Why? Because he was a member of his local athletic club, Bolton Primrose Harriers. He liked running. Wasn't very good. Went halfway down the field on a normal sort of 1,500 kilometer race, something like that. And he thought, if I put spikes in the bottom of my shoes, would it help? Because they ran on cinder tracks. So he, being a cobbler, like his grandfather, he made himself a pair of track spikes, or pumps as they called them in those days, with 6 spikes in the bottom. And his next race, yes, he came a very unlikely second, which most of his teammates were sort of very suspicious, looking at what he'd got on his feet. And of course, that was the beginning of a business. Everybody wanted Joe Foster spikes. So he grew his business. And by 1900, yes, he had real business going. In 1904, he had 3 world records at one event in Glasgow. And by 1908, he had gold medals at the London Olympics. The second decade of the 20th century, we had World War I. Not good. Nobody wanted to run his shoes. So they ended up repairing army boots brought back from Flanders, and that kept them going until the second decade, the 20s, the 1920s. That was his decade. That was his belle epoque. Fantastic. We do have a letterhead from the 20s, and on it we have, he supplied 96 rugby and football teams, and we're talking about Man United, Man City, Arsenal. We're talking about all the big teams, Liverpool. You mentioned, and they're all there. He supplied them all with boots, and he also supplied the Antwerp Olympic Games in 1920. All the athletes there. Well, that's magnificent, brilliant. Way before Adidas, way before Nike. He was the king. He did it all. Unfortunately, he died in 1933, and I wasn't born until 1935. Never knew grandfather, but I'm born on his birthday, the 18th of May, which is coincidence or whatever, but much of a coincidence, so much so that my grandmother said he brought his name with him. So my grandfather was Joe, and I am Joe. So that's the beginning. That's where the family started.
Amazing. And do you know what's interesting is that, any person now that goes on Instagram and they follow major influencers will see these people promoting teeth whitening or detox tea or whatever rubbish people promote. And this inevitably blows these companies up. Your grandfather seemed to be a master of doing that. So I wonder how important were, quote unquote, influencers for that business at that time?
Well, I think it's a fairly simple way of looking at business. To get people to buy your product, you show how good it is by somebody making a world record or winning a gold medal, which is the same today. It's not changed. Influencers are people that wear a product, use a product, and people look up to them. People respect them. So yes, grandfather, before he ever knew the word influencer, before anybody knew the word influencer, he knew what influencing meant. He knew how to get people to buy his shoes. And some of the advertising he used to do was ridiculous. And you can go back to the probably the 1900s when he advertised, if anybody thinks that J.W. Foster spikes are not the best spikes they've ever worn, we'll give you £100. Can you think of £100 in those days? We're probably talking about £10,000, something like that today. It's incredible. I don't know if he ever gave £100 away, by the way. We don't have any follow-up on those ads. But, incredible sort of initiative and a way to get his products around the world. And luckily for him, and luckily for Reebok in many ways, Athletics Weekly was, of course, if you're a runner, you're part of a club, everybody bought Athletics Weekly. So advertising in that sort of helped promote the brand and grow it into what J.W. Foster's became. But so unfortunately he died, say, in 1933, and I wasn't born until 1935. But of course, 4 years later, we have World War II. So we have blackout, 6 years of World War II, not a great deal of education, a little bit, but most of the guys had gone off to fight a war. So we had a few women teachers, and that was okay, but there were not enough to go around, obviously. And but of course, by 1945, the war is over. I'm 10, Jeff is 12, and we start enjoying life like most people do. The lights are on again. We can go, well, we couldn't go buy things because rationing was very much there. And for, I think it's 5 or 6 more years we had rationing, but at least the lights came on, and we were a bit lucky. Well, I say lucky. My grandmother had bought a car, a Renault,
Okay.
before the war. And of course, the problem is this was a French car and France was occupied. And in those days, they had a crown wheel and pinion, which was the driving shaft really for the car. And that had gone. So the car spent the whole of the war in the garage until after the war. And then he managed to get it repaired again. But why they bought a Renault, I don't know. In fact, we used to call it a Renault because we didn't know this French pronunciation of Renault with a T at the end. But yeah, so now things are starting to get back to normal. You know, you go to the local dance hall, and I was playing badminton, Jeff was on his bike cycling, and that's great. I think Jeff joined the company when he was 15, but I went to college and did engineering. I studied engineering, and I joined the company when I was 17. 1 year after that, when I'm 18, I'm surprised enough, even though Jeff had done two years more, we both went, within 6 months, we were both doing national service. So here we are now, national service, 2 years away. You know, you learn an awful lot. Mother's not preparing your food, she's not doing your washing, doing all the things that normally you get done being at home. You have to start thinking for yourself. And after 2 years, we come back, both Jeff and I come back to the family business. And what do we see? A failing company. We could recognize coming back to a company. Jeff had been in Germany. He'd seen Adidas, he'd seen Puma. And he's coming back, and we're saying, look, guys, to my father and uncle who now are running the business, it's about time we changed. We need to move up a gear or two, because you've not done anything for the last 10, 15 years. You're making the same shoes and life's moving on. So we had a problem.
I would love to pick up on that story, because, you know, for most people, you know, the dream, I guess, for most men is, how can I make my father proud? You've just given an example there, which I think is well worth emphasizing, is that you come back from national service and you've kind of, you know, you and Jeff, you said to your parents, look, you know, this business is failing. I wonder if you could kind of talk about that in a little bit more detail, about kind of that dynamic and perhaps the breakdown that kind of led to, I guess, with your father. And a very amusing story I read in the book about the letter opener, which I absolutely loved.
Well, as you can well imagine, we come back and we're a little bit more self-sufficient, a little bit more thinking, you know, we can do things better, as you do. We're younger. I'm 23. No, I came out of the forces at 20. Jeff was 22. So we're very young. And, you know, but we want to see something. We want to see. But problem. My father and uncle, they were fighting each other. There were 5 years difference in age, and they just did not get on. And my father had sort of developed machinery, or shoes using machines. My uncle was still doing the traditional hand-sewn running shoes that Foster's were really noted for. And they had their own set of books. And they never talked to each other. They may grunt at each other as they walked past. So the business was going nowhere. You know, they needed to work together. Now, while my grandmother was alive, this sort of kept everything, I wouldn't say normal, but it kept a peaceful situation.
Right.
But when she died, it was like World War III. That was it. They just couldn't speak with each other. Well, it's not different for Adidas. You know, the Dassler brothers were the same. Adi Dassler and Rudy Dassler, they just didn't get on. They fought until Rudy, he left and set up Puma. Well, good idea. The Fosters, they just kept feuding. They just kept fighting. So you can imagine the business, it's going down. And we come back from 2 years away, we come back to it, and it's patently obvious that this is a big problem. And I remember saying to my father, look, Dad, we've got to change. We've got to do some things. You know, either you come with us and we'll set up another business, or you buy Bill out, or you got to do something because you're not getting on together. And all my father could say to me is, look, Joe, when your uncle's gone and I'm gone, this business is yours. You can do what you like with it. And I say, Dad, number one, we don't want you to go. That's not the plan. Number two, this business will be gone long, long, long before you are. And where we're going to go. Well, he took no notice. That was it. Just no, didn't matter. So Jeff and I, we decided we're going to go to college. So at night school, there was Rossendale College was a footwear college. And the beauty of going to the college was that not only did we learn more about making shoes in different ways, we also made a lot of friends, a lot of people we could turn to. And that became a source of help when we needed it. Because we did. When we decided eventually, okay, father and uncle, we're never going to make any headway there, we'd better go. So Jeff and I planned to go. We actually rented an old brewery, Berry Brewery. Yeah, an old brewery. It was an old brewery as well. Berry Brewery had moved out of it a long time ago. And a bedding company had used it for some time. But we couldn't use the top floor. The top, because of the roof. The roof was absolutely shattered. And we had more tin cans up there than you could count. It was all gathered in the water. When it rained, it came through. Plus the fact that it had been raining for so long on that floor that it was dangerous. It was quite dangerous, that floor. And you had to be very careful where you stood. And the bottom floor, somehow a brewery, they needed no windows in the bottom floor. I don't know what that was all about, but there were no windows. So we didn't use the bottom floor. So we used the middle floor, which was great, did the job, but still we considered the floor was a bit weak. So all our machinery was put around the side. And we did all the hand making and whatever it is in the middle. So that was our factory, which we decided we eventually, as you say, I went in to see my father and say, Dad, Jeff and I are leaving. And he didn't, he ignored me. And I said, Dad, did you hear me? We're leaving. He turned around and said, what's that? I said, well, we've decided that we're going to set up our own business, and so we're leaving. And with that, I should say, he picked up this letter opener. And I didn't know what he was going to do with it, but he came towards me with this letter opener. And he eventually just turned around and handed it to me. He said, here, stab me now. Oh, not a very good way to say we're setting up a new business, but yeah, it took him a while to get over that, but yeah, we that was the time when we left.
And just for people listening, I just want to clarify, I take it you didn't actually stab him. I just want to put that caveat there.
No, he died of a heart attack some time later.
Yeah, I just felt like that was an important caveat.
I didn't stab him, no.
So yeah, so let's move forward, because I'd love to come back to kind of obviously you mentioned this factory. It's got no windows downstairs. You've had to put all your machinery to one side of the room. But I'd love to just kind of go a little bit before that. So the name Reebok, I mean, everybody, listening to this, they must know, they must have heard of the brand Reebok. It's everywhere. I was in the gym earlier. I saw people there wearing Reebok shoes, Reebok t-shirts. How did the company come to be called Reebok?
Well, when we left, we set up the business as Mercury Sports Footwear. That was our name, and we liked our name, Mercury Sports Footwear. What's wrong with that? No, it's good. In fact, we were doing quite well. We were sort of doing cycle. We started off with cycle shoes, and this was good. But 18 months into our business, our accountant, he said, Joe, you're doing well. You're doing okay, making some money. Fine. About time you registered your name. What? Registered the name? No, that's our name. Well, you've got to register it, he said. Okay, why? Well, look, I'm not the only person that sees that you're doing well in the business. And there's plenty of other people out there might say, these Mercury shoes, who's good? We'll make some of those. Then you've got a problem, because who owns the name?
Right.
You've got to own that name. Okay. What do I do? You know, with Shoemakers, what do I do? Oh, you go and see this guy, and he gave me a name of a patent agent. So they do all these registration things. Said, go see this this patent agent. Okay, will do. So I see the patent agent and say, hello, my accountant tells me I need to register my name, which is Mercury. And the guy said, okay, fine, we'll see what we can do with that. A week later, he came back to me and he said, Joe, problem is that the name is already registered. Oh. He said, but they will sell it to you. And the company is Lawson and Delta, which are part of British Shoe Corporation. They have it registered, but they're not using it. Oh, right. But so you can buy it. Right. How much do they want? £1,000. Oh, sorry. £1,000. No, we just set a factory up for £250. A whole factory, £1,000. No, we have not got that. We haven't got the money. But he said, well, you could take them to court because they're not using it. You could take them to court and claim the name that is because of they're not using it. How much does that cost? He said about £1,000. Okay. No, we haven't got £1,000 either to buy it or to go to court or whatever. So he said, well, he pointed through his window. It was a nice day in May and nice and warm, window open. And he pointed through the window to Kodak. Okay, I said, well, what's with Kodak? Well, he said, Kodak is made up. They made that name up. It's theirs. It means nothing else but Kodak. It means nothing else. Mercury, we all know Mercury. It has other connotations, so other people use it, but Kodak. So he said, if you want, bring me a name like that. But he said, don't bring me one name. Bring me 10. 10? I don't know if you've thought we'd better give this a name. And you're sitting down and you're thinking, sometimes it's easy. Other times it's like, oh, where do I go with this?
Right.
And we went to some funny places trying to think up names. We really did. But, you know, we said, okay, we'll sit down and think. Cougar. How about Cougar Sports? That sounds pretty good. Yeah. Falcon. Falcon, yeah. Falcon Sports. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Why? Yeah, we could use that. Okay. Yeah, you can see where we're going. Animals or birds or whatever. But I got to take you back now to 1943. I'm 8 years old. And we're in the middle of World War II. Like COVID, nobody could go anywhere. It was like nowhere to go, no petrol anyway. If you had a car, nothing was happening, no lights on. So, okay, so it was all these stay-at-home holidays. And we had some sort of running competitions going on, and I was entered into a 60-yard race. Okay, I have a secret weapon. I have Foster spikes. Okay, so I win the race. Hey, great, one race. What now? Go up, collect your prize. What do I get? A dictionary. A dictionary. I'm 8 years old. There's a war on. And it's an American dictionary. Webster's American Dictionary. And I'm saying, disgustedly, where's the football? You know, come on, I'm only a kid. Where's the football? I think I used a few expletives at the time because I didn't think the dictionary was a fair sort of, you know, I won this race. Anyway, I obviously kept the dictionary because here I am now in 1960 and the dictionary is sat here on the desk. An American dictionary. Okay. So I like the letter R. I think it's a strong beginning to any word, R. And I open my book at R and I start thumbing through. Soon I come across R-E-E-B-O-K. Reebok. Oh, Reebok. What's that? Well, it's a small South African gazelle. We're a running company. Gazelle. Fantastic. That's it. Top of the list. So we have our list of 10 names now with Reebok at the top. I go back and I see my agent and I say, look, I need this. I'm giving you 10, but I need Reebok. But he's a lawyer. Okay, Joe, see what we can do. you know, we'll see what the register comes up with. I think it took him 2 weeks to get through the whole of the 10. And he came back, Joe, you've got your wish. You can have Reebok. Couple of small problems, but they're only phonetic and nobody's using it. And we think you're pretty clear. Right, okay, can have it. However, the registrar has made a comment, and there's a caveat on this, and that is that if anybody comes along and starts making shoes out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Okay, all right. But you know, Jeff and I, we say, yeah, that's never going to happen. Nobody's going to just do that. Because, no. So we became Reebok. However, because of the caveat, the registrar said, you're going to have to go in the B section of the register. It's a register. You know, by this time, it's like, we need a name. We need to get on with life. We need to be in love with that name. Put us in your B section. I say, great. So we're in the register and we start. We've got Reebok. 10 years later, the registrar came back and said, we've moved you. You're now in the A section because now everybody knows that Reebok is a sports shoe. And the animal, unfortunately, has to take second place. So that's how we got Reebok.
An amazing story. And I think that it's kind of teased me up nicely. So, you know, you're at this place, you've kind of gone a separate way from your father, from your uncle, you've gone through national service. I imagine you kind of, as you talk about in the book, that builds up a lot of character, builds up a lot of discipline. You've got yourself a factory, which, you know, it sounds like it could collapse any day. I'm not sure what health and safety would think of it in this day and age. But I'd kind of love to kind of pick up on this point, because when a lot of people think of being an entrepreneur, they think of the glitz, they think of the glamour, they think of the buyouts. They don't think so much about, you know, the factories. They don't think about, for instance, in your case, I know you talk about in the book that, you know, you were selling things for other people just to try to make ends meet. I wonder if you could talk about kind of what that period was like, the sacrifices that you had to make just to stay in business.
Well, I don't think we felt it was sacrifices. I think I particularly felt that there's steps along the road, and there's ways to get your product into the retail area and selling other people's product. Well, if I went in, I can give you an example of Fair Brothers. Fair Brothers, they produced dart flights. Well, they produced darts as well, but the flights were in feathers. And in Bolton was a big centre for dart playing. I don't know why. I'm fortunate, maybe. So I could go into a sports shop called Windet, and every time I went in there, he'd give me an order for hundreds of dart flies. Hundreds. You know, it's like, great, just write this down. You know, it made me probably £50 on that one visit, you know, and in those days, £50 was a lot of money. I may have sold a couple of pairs of shoes, but it got me in. So selling other people's products, yeah, was okay. And it gave me experience of what I needed to do. I'm trying to improve the possibility of, you know, increasing our business, growing our business into something bigger, because we were in athletics. We were in cycling, but that's another story. We actually came out of cycling and we were in athletics. We still did a bit of cycling, but we're in athletics. And you know, the big thing was soccer or football. Football was big, but unfortunately, by the time Jeff and I left the Foster brand, Adidas had come into the country, and Adidas were very strong in football. And for us to go into football, that would have cost a lot of money, because we would have needed promotion. We needed an awful lot to really get in and make a name. But we were making a name in athletics, and this was great. But, you know, I'm taking these products and I'm going around to stores, and I'm introducing myself as Reebok. And the guy's saying, who's Reebok? Oh, here we are, show your product. These are running shoes and whatever. Yeah, nice product. But so many would just look up and say, look, I've got Adidas, I've got Dunlop. Why do I need Reebok? Big question. It struck me, why? He didn't need Reebok. So why did he need Reebok? I needed to find people who needed Reebok. How do I do that? Well, the retailer he was a man in between. I needed to get to the athlete. As it happened, the 3As, the Amateur Athletic Association, it was all amateur in those days, the 3As produced a handbook. And the handbook had about between 200-400 clubs, the name and address of every secretary in those clubs. Simple, write a letter, offer a discount. So, and I sort of included the fact that if anybody in the club wanted to be my agent, he could have the discount, he could have the 15%. Right. So off went the letter, and I was amazed. I ended up with about 200 agents. 200 agents, and so our business is booming. Fine, we've found the way in now. We found the way into the athletes. And then I'm getting phone calls from retailers, from sports retailers saying, Mr. Foster, we believe you're selling direct to our local athletic club. And we'd have a little conversation as to which club that was. And I say, yes, yeah, we're doing that. And now he's saying, well, if you stop selling, I will stop your product in the store. Okay. I said, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I only give 15% off. You get my product, you'll get it wholesale price, which is less than half the price. You get it wholesale price, and I'm sure you can give 15% off. And I'm sure most athletes would prefer to come to you than to go through the mail order process. Oh, about 90% of those phone calls turned into customers. So I did have quite a lot of retailers, but we didn't stop selling direct, and our business now was growing. But we're still only selling running shoes. We tried a football boot, and yeah, we've got a few, but really, we're not a name. We were not influencing the footballers or influencing people who were watching football, because those are the people. But I did know that really, to expand our business, America, we needed America, because every college, every university has coach, and coach is a god in America. He really is such an important person. And there are so many universities, colleges across America. And we have 350 million people. Look at that time, we were at 60 million in the UK, and the spending power of people in America were about 10 times better than in the UK. So I thought, I've got to get to America. Of course, talked this through with Jeff and the family. We can't afford that. That's an expensive operation. Going to America, how can we justify that? Well, I have to think. However, I'm reading a magazine, Eurosport, and there's an advertisement from the government, and they're saying, we want you to advertise, and in particular to America. And we would provide you with a stand at the NSGA show. That's the National Sporting Goods of America, in Chicago in February. We'll not only provide you with a stand, but your return airfare and 50% of your living costs whilst you're out there, your hotel bills and food. Wow. But no more objections from the family. Joe, you go. And Jeff and I, we had a very good relationship, so much different from my father and uncle. And Jeff loved the factory. He really loved it. And he said, Joe, leave the factory to me. You do everything else. Well, everything else meant a lot of things. So designing, buying materials, a lot of the buying materials, I would do a lot of that. But also mainly it was the selling. It was marketing and selling. So, okay, we're going to America. This is 1968. And my first time And I went with a friend of mine, friend called Bob Brigham. You may know of the Ellis Brigham outdoor stores. He's got quite a few these days. But Bob had one in Manchester, so he was happy. I was making a boot for him, making a rock climbing boot, because our sort of business was fairly lightweight. This was a lightweight boot, nice. So we were good friends at that time. So we came. He went to look at we went to New York first. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why even to this day we decided to take a 2-week ticket, because it was, yeah, I think it's still cheaper today if you do that. If you take an in and out from the same destination, it's cheaper to take 2 weeks because you're spending money there, whatever reason. If you only take a one way, and you know, the government were paying. So I have no idea why we were worried about saving some money. However, we did a couple of nice sort of side tracks on this one, and we went into New York. Bob went looking at the outdoor stores. I went looking at the sports stores. Great, we got a good feel. Remember going around Times Square, and I remember us going to the restaurant, Tad's Steak Bar. And Tad's Steak Bar, for $1, you get a big steak and a big baked potato with a big slice of butter. And oh, magnificent, for $1. Today you'd be lucky to get that for $20. Anyway, those are the memories you get when you do these things. But we went on then to Chicago. And this is the first week in Chicago, first week in February. And Chicago is cold, colder than I've ever known it. It was really, really cold, freezing. But however, the show is good. You get 4 days at the show. And yeah, the people love the shoes. Great. Yeah, where do we get your shoes from? England. And it's like, oh, is that New England? No, England. You know, across the water. Oh, near London. Yep, near London. That was it. I realized I need a distributor. I needed someone over there. Okay. Well, Bob actually sold a few of his shoes. So since we were making them, that means we did sell something. So we got up. But fortunately, the government really kept behind this scheme, and for many years. But this is 1968. And I knew I now needed a distributor. And when did I get my distributor? 1979. 11 years. It took 11 years and at least 6 failures. And we really tried. I had 6 different attempts trying to get in there. People who would take the product, push, but no, you know, we couldn't make it. One of the guys actually spent 4 years with me just trying to sell the product, get the product in. But now this is where our luck comes in. Some people say there's no such thing as luck. It's just being prepared for when the opportunity arrives. Well, you have to be there at the right time. And there's got to be something that says, you know, I'm lucky to be born. I'm lucky to be doing this. In fact, I had this conversation with a guy in New York. I forget his name now, but and he was saying he believed in luck, because he said, you know, I'm an American. I live in New York, and I was born in America. That for me is lucky. So, you know, there's an element here that, yeah, if you're born in the right place, if you're there at the right time, you know, yes, you can be prepared. So, but we were there at the right time in America. The end of the 1960s, running in America became something of a big category. All of a sudden, people were out training for fitness. They're out on the roads, and the business was growing. And with that business was a magazine, Runner's World. Runner's World provided all the information you needed for where are the best events, who won the last events, who are the top runners, where's the next 5K, 10K, half marathons. So everybody who was out there running started to buy this magazine. By 1975, from being a single page in the late 60s, he was now a 50 to 60 full gloss color magazine. Fantastic magazine. Bob Anderson was the publisher, and I did go along to see Bob. He was in Los Altos, I think it is, near San Francisco. And he decided that he could tell everybody which was the #1 shoe to buy. Now, you're talking about 350 million Americans. By this time, 10% of them were running, 35 million out there. And if somebody say this is the #1 shoe, 10% of that 10%, 3.5 million want that shoe now. Of course, it was a Nike. And Phil Knight, oh, thrilled, fantastic. But he's importing these shoes from Japan. Could he turn up the volume? Could he do that? No, couldn't do it. Everybody's saying, where are these shoes? Where's this #1? Well, the limited amount that could come in didn't really make much difference. And so the retail trade are getting really sort of, you've told everybody this is #1, we can't get the shoe. So Bob Anderson ignored this, and a year later decided he would say, no, there's a different shoe now. This is another #1 shoe. I can't remember whether that was a New Balance, a Tonic, a Brooks, or whoever. There's a lot of shoes out there that it certainly wasn't Reebok. I know that. So the same thing happened. Whoever was #1, they still couldn't supply. A year later, he'd obviously learned a lot from the problem and decided instead of saying who's #1, he would do star ratings. So 5-star ratings, those would be the best shoes you could buy. Okay. Then he'd go down 4-star and he'd rate them. I don't know. They had a way of testing and whatever, but I knew we could make a 5-star shoe. I knew he had a good chance. We knew what he was looking for. And by 1978, we had Aztec. In fact, we had a gold range. The gold range was Aztec was our training shoe, Midas was our racing shoe, and Inca was our track spike. And we tested these out at Edmonton at the Commonwealth Games. And we got a lot of medals. We did really well. We did indeed. So I thought, yeah, now, February 1979, NSGA, Chicago. I'm here with my prospective 5-star shoe. Brilliant. And everybody's into running these days. It was a big category now. And we got Kmart. I don't know if you know Kmart, if you've been to America, Kmart, very big retailers. Kmart came along and said, we'd like to buy 25,000 pairs. Well, we still haven't got a 5-star shoe yet, but oh, great. I'm thinking 25,000 pairs. But, prior to making the shoe and getting there, I have a friend who worked well, he was setting up the sports division for Barter. You may not know Barter. Barter used to be on every high street in the country. They are still the biggest volume shoemaker in the world by volume, but they're big in India, big in Latin America. But at those days, they were big in Europe. And my friend Shaq said, well, we'll make your shoes for you if you get some orders, because 25,000 pairs, our small factory in Barrie, we could probably manage 6 months to do that. Probably take us 6 months. Well, that wouldn't satisfy anybody. But then Kmart, the guy from Kmart said, yeah, but we want a better price. Well, Barter could do a better price, but not the better that he was talking about. That meant for us South Korea, meant going to Asia. And again, by good fortune, I met up with the representative from one of the biggest groups in South Korea, the London representative. So I met that guy, and they were interested in sampling for us. Right. So, okay, got that covered. Fine. Halfway through the show, a lot of people were coming onto the stand, but halfway through the show, a guy called Paul Feynman came onto the stand. And he was running a company called Boston Camping. So, and I could tell he was pretty much fed up with Boston Camping. They're selling tents, they're selling fishing rods, you name it, all that sort of stuff in the outdoor business. But he had a business. And Paul and I got on well with him. Some people you could just talk to. It's great. Yeah. You know, and he's saying, Joe, if you get 5 stars, I'm your man. I'll be your distributor. Fantastic. Okay, Paul. And we left it at that. In May, because this is February, and the shoe edition will not be out until August. Well, the last week in July, but that's the shoe edition when we know if we're going to be 5 stars. And I go back in May. I go to see Kmart, and I'm introduced to the guy who'd come onto the stand, and he was part of about 60 other buyers, all sat in this room doing what we're doing for Kmart. And I'm thinking, you know, this could be my first 25,000 pairs. It could also be my last 25,000 pairs, because they will probably judge the product on how many they sell and how much money they make per square foot. So I was feeling, no, that's not for me. So I trip on to Boston. He was in Detroit. The Kmart's head office, Detroit. So I go on to Boston and I meet up with Paul and his brother and his brother-in-law, who were all part of Boston campaign. Oh, nice team. Jim Bartley was head of sales. Yeah, this is good. Fantastic. Great. Back I go to the UK, and Paul decided he would come to see, well, he'd heard of Reebok. Just what? Who's Reebok? It was the same question. So he came across, and I think he was mightily disappointed at the size of our factory, because it wasn't exactly big, it wasn't plush, it was just a factory in Perry. And well, by then we'd moved, but we'd moved to an old felting mill, which was just another mill in Lancashire. And yeah, but okay, he wanted to go to some of the races to see if Reebok was represented. Well, of course, we knew where Reebok was represented. We took him to 3 races. We knew the winner would be Reebok, and we knew half the field would be wearing Reebok. So I'm sure Paul knew we were taking him to the races that we were choosing, but at least he saw that Reebok were there. We were not just a figment of somebody's imagination, just turning up at the NSGA show with some shoes. No, we're a proper company. Right, so we went back. Last week in July, I ring Paul. I said, Paul, can you go to the kiosk and see if the Runner's World is there? Because by now it should be out, and see if we did how we did with the 5 stars. It took him about an hour to come back. Remind you, I rang him about 12 o'clock our time, which is something like 7 o'clock Boston time. So I think it took him a bit to get up and get himself out. However, an hour later he came back, Joe, Aztec, 5 stars, you've got it. Fantastic. Absolutely. That was a sort of a moment. We knew that we'd got in to the American market. But more than that, Inca and Midas had also got 5 stars. So we had 3 5-star shoes, and that got us into America.
Amazing. And it's worth me pointing out to you and adding, I think, a little bit more detail from reading your book, that within that story, you know, if you pick up the book, you will realize the struggle, the massive rejection, I guess, that you alluded to. It took you 11 years to get into America. You said you were rejected 6 times along the way. There was problems with scaling the business. So many little things along the way. Did you ever think at any point, did you ever feel like quitting at any point in that journey? Well,
I guess progress was slow. But, you know, there was always even though we failed, there was always something positive about it. We're always able to say, well, you know, we're going to make this. And I don't think I ever got very low with it. I knew that we needed to find that gatekeeper. We needed to find something. We needed to get in there. But yeah, it's like, what else do you do? We didn't have what we have today. We didn't have social media. We didn't have computers. The only thing you can do is to keep going knocking on the door. And it's like many salesmen say, you know, you can knock on the door 100 times, but you're getting nearer to somebody opening it.
Right.
And so this was probably my approach to this. And we were having success. You know, we had Ron Hill he won the Boston Marathon in Reebok, and he won it in record time. We had many other athletes who were doing really well in America, but it was finding a way that it needed money. It needed somebody who could, even though we got Paul Fireman didn't have much money. We found that. And the other thing I found out is that when we agreed that he would be our distributor and I went over next time, Boston Camping didn't exist. They'd closed down Boston Camping. Because I thought this would be a nice bolt-on business. So I must admit, it did worry me a bit at that time. And I think within the first 12 months, Paul Fireman actually had a heart attack. And we were, you know, so there were a lot of sort of, have we got there? Have we, you know, moments of wondering how we're going to manage this. And of course, for the first 20,000 pairs, Barter came in and Barter made the shoes.
Yeah.
But the problem is that Barter, a big company, they had their own rubber factory. So we just started using EVA, which is a plastic, a blown plastic, which is very spongy, nice, but very light. And you could make that in a rubber factory. And so Barter, making these shoes, made their own rubber, or made their own EVA. 90% of it, perfect. 10%, for some unknown reason, was undercured. So instead of it being nice and spongy, it collapsed. So another thing they did is that Barter, they were shoemakers. And so they wanted to make the shoes efficiently. So instead of taking our design as they should have done and absolutely copying it, they decided, no, they could do this a bit rounder and they could do this a bit different, and that would be easier for their machinists to sew. Great. But you know, our biggest tragedy right at this moment, we just got in there, it was great. Unfortunately, my brother, Jeff, he was hospitalized. I was over in America at the time. And the problem was that he had stomach cancer and they operated. And unfortunately, an embolism. He just died with an embolism. So I did see him, but I mean, there was nothing that could be done. So we're just on this cusp, we were just ready. And at this point, Jeff would have been going down to Barter. He would have been overseeing, because that was his job. He was product. He would have been overseeing what was going on. Because he wasn't there, they did the changes. And those changes, when they got to America, it wasn't the changes that was the problem. It was the fact that the EVA that they'd made collapsed. So we had 20,000 pairs of, what do we do? Well, in a way, it helped Paul Fireman because he didn't pay for the product. And if some came back, he just shipped a different pair. If it came back, just ship a pair. So in a way, it gave us time until we could get the Korean production, which was great. Nothing wrong with the Barter production, apart from the fact that they'd got this new EVA mix. They got that just off, and the fact they changed the design, but we could change it back again. That was, you know, but I say, unfortunately, Jeff at that time, I lost him. And I guess that's one of the things that, you know, a big tragedy, because it was fantastic, but it probably made me more and more determined that we're going to make this work. And we did. You know, we eventually became number one. But it was we went through some big sort of moments which were near tragedy, and yet we came through.
I actually wanted to ask you this question, because this is one of the things I wanted to pay tribute to you about in your book, because, you know, this podcast, an educational podcast, I read a lot of books for a lot of people I interview. I read their books, and a lot of people, they will paint, I guess, a distorted or an unbalanced picture of their life, of their journey to success. But man, you talk about it all in the book. You talk obviously about the tragedy of your brother dying. You talk about the very, very tragic loss of your daughter dying. You mentioned in the just by there you found that those things they spurred you on. I wonder if you could kind of talk about that, about how those tragic losses, how you kind of dealt with those.
Well, I think it's, I mean, I know these are tragedies, and you try and compare them with this almost going out of business because a distributor goes out of business. A lot of those, but I think you have to have, your concentration has to be on what's good. We know what's bad, but what's good? How can we sort of, you know, build on the good? How can we scale up on this? What can we do? How can I replace people? You can't. But what you can do is to say, well, we can't replace them, but this business has to keep going. And you know, we while Jeff was there, like me, we had ambition. He had ambition, and I'm pretty sure that seeing where we eventually got to, he would have been really, really pleased with all that. Because whilst we went in with running, you know, things that happened, we became an aerobics company. We became a woman's fitness company. You know, we were only small when we arrived in America, but the fact that these things kept moving, it helps. I mean, okay, had there been tragedies and tragedies, but I guess I was able to cope with them one at a time as they came along. You know, sometimes you get double things happen, but and maybe with the problem with the barter product, you know, that, but I felt a bit sort of arm's length with that. You know, barter had to put that right, and you know, in America they were having the problem of the sales. So I think in a way you look at, like I say, well, I can't just sit down and put my head in my hands and just say, that's it. I think you have to. I think it's probably human nature which says, no, there's a way out. And we've got to find a way out. We've got to find that. It took 3 people to replace Jeff for what he was doing. It took me getting another man to do the designing and pattern making. Took another person for that. Somebody to look after the office at the factory, and somebody to look after production. It took 3 people, and it wasn't just the first time. I had a couple of shots at getting the right people, but I guess it's probably being driven. I could probably see a goal we needed to achieve, and I could also see that once we got into America, I mean, that was probably a major market for us. So there was always something which was taking me forward. There was always something to say, wow, yeah, we can keep on moving on this one. And I mean, you just can't sort of, you can't talk your way out of your main partner and brother dying. There just is no way. It is a tragedy in itself. But I do think just keeping going, I think it would have been worse to have sort of thought, no, this is too much. So, and Jeff himself would have wanted us to really take the best out of what we'd just achieved. We just achieved an incredible breakthrough to get into America. So I'm pretty sure that those were sort of thoughts at the time. It's hard to say because I was all over the place. I was on airplanes. I was wherever. I was doing whatever it was to get this product to work. But even though we were running, I say it was aerobics that really grew our company.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And thank you for talking about those things, by the way. I would love to kind of ask you, you know, because you obviously built Reebok into a behemoth. I don't feel like that's hyperbolic of me to say it's, you know, #1 in the UK. Why did you leave?
Well, you know, when we got into aerobics, and that in itself is a story, and if you read the book, you pick that up. We were a $9 million company, 5 years later, we were a $900 million company. So we'd gone from almost zero to $1 billion in 5 years. And by that time, you know, you've noted all the challenges. By that time, the challenges are gone.
Right.
For me, we'd overtaken Adidas, we'd overtaken Nike. We became the #1 sports shoe company at nearly $4 billion. And after putting on America and letting America grow and, you know, really sort of working with, I spent the next few years traveling, putting on distributors. I put on another 30 different countries distributors. So I was flying a lot around the world, be it Australia, Japan, you name it, I was going. And so eventually, when we got to the point where we had a ton of lawyers, a lot of accountants, and a lot of people in between selling and doing all sorts of designers, you know, for me, when Jeff said, "You do the rest," well, the rest was never being done by an awful lot of people. And so for me, which is right. And I thought that my journey hasn't ended, but it's time to step aside. It's time, because a lot of those people, you know, and I think you take people on, and the right people are the ones who can do things better than you can. The ones who can actually take that next step and make things grow. You know, I don't know anybody who just can sort of be there at the top and have all the ideas, and you can't, you know. But we had developed a winning culture, a culture that attracted the right people, and they could see this growth. So they, you know, there were so many people in the company, and I ended up 3 times a year I'd be flying around the world, and wherever I went, I'd be picked up by a limousine. Stay at the best hotels, go to the best restaurants, and talk about the business. But you know, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? And you know, I mean, apart from that, I was also hosting pro celebrity tennis at Monte Carlo. This was in aid of the Princess Grace Foundation, and so you know, I was meeting all these A-listers from Hollywood. I've got a list if you want. John Forsythe, Linda Evans, Joan Collins, Frank Sinatra, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Jane Seymour, Robert De Niro, Michael Caine, Charlton Heston, Veronica Hamill, Dolph Lundgren, he was He-Man, Robert Wagner, and Jill St. John. You know, these are just sort of a few of all the people we used to bring into Monte Carlo and have this wonderful experience of a tennis tournament with the top tennis players as well. So yeah, but you get to that point and you think, well, this is okay, but it's not real. You know, I'm enjoying this, but you know, there's only a period, and I don't want to keep on flying around the world. Time for me to sort of move away. So, like I say, whilst I retired, it was a bit like Hotel California, and you know, you can check out, but you can never leave. So I checked out, but leaving, well, I don't suppose I'll ever leave, in terms of the fact that, you know, as a founder, you still remain a founder. A lot of CEOs come and go, but as a founder, and now, of course, having written the book, you've read it. A lot of people are now wanting us to do things. So we're off to America with a couple of meetings there, but next year, we've got a list of next year is going to be about between 8 and 10 months in America, doing all the different venues and whatever. So it's, I want is to sell the book. New challenge.
New challenge, and you know, again, I think it takes us back to the conversation. You know, you seem full of life, full of enthusiasm, full of energy, and I guess that's a secret in itself, the longevity. So, man, I truly admire your passion. I just got a couple of quick fire questions for you before we sign off. One of the things, obviously, you know, we've spoken about your book today. You've talked us through this incredible journey. There's been ups, there's been downs. I'd love to know if someone that's listening to this podcast today, now they perhaps have someone that wants to go into entrepreneurship. what would a little bit of wisdom be that you could impart from your incredible journey to that person?
Well, I guess it's something that, I mean, I've been asked many times, and the same answer. I mean, I was asked this way back. And for me, it was, you've got to have fun. And you've got to have a lot of fun. So first one's fun, second one's more fun, and third one, absolutely make sure you're having fun. Because if you're not having fun, it's no go.
I love it, man. You've written a fantastic book that for all the people listening to this, they can just swipe up on the episode and they will get a copy of your book. For the people watching on YouTube, it's in the description below. You've obviously got a bookshelf behind you. Yes. I would love to know, are there any books that you've read that have greatly impacted your life that you could recommend to our audience?
Oh, it's hard to say. Again, I've been asked that one. I guess I read more fiction. If I'm reading, it's fiction. And I like Grisham. I think he writes some very interesting books. And also Brown, you know, some of those, the Da Vinci Code and things like that. I think it's using your imagination. And if it fires your imagination, I think that's good, because you read fiction, you actually see something when you're reading it. You know, you're actually seeing the characters, you build them yourself. And I think for me, in many ways, Reebok was fiction. Reebok was building the characters, building whatever it is. If you can think it, you can build it. So, you know, we try that. So I think if it catches imagination, you know, it's good. I did read Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog. And there's a certain amount of similarity between our journeys.
Right.
You know, just and it was good. You know, he was in America, I was in Europe. I think he had a good advantage of being in America, because that's where the market was. I think I had a different advantage of being in a shoemaking family. So we each had our own sort of characters there. And so reading a book, yeah, I used to read more than I read now. I think, unfortunately, now if I'm reading, it puts me to sleep. It's like, yeah, I think that's something to do with age.
Yeah, and both fascinating books. But if you only pick one, I recommend yours. Not only because we have the same first name, but I truly enjoyed your book. But yeah, man, my last question for you today, before I ask you to sign off, send these guys wherever you'd like them to go, any recommendations you have, is the question we sign off all of our podcasts with. And the last question I'm going to ask you today is, what makes a life worth living?
Well, I think it's, when I say achievement doesn't necessarily mean to say you've got to build a sports company to become number one. You know, you can achieve many things, and I think it's worth living if you have challenges. And if you don't have challenges, I don't think you can really value life. You've got to put yourself in a position of challenge, and because challenges, and it's like problems. You know, we always found, we look at a problem. Okay, initially we worried about problems, but we soon realized that that's a challenge, and that means that you can pivot, you can go somewhere else. You've got to. So I think there are challenges, and I think in life, yes, a life worth living is if you can continue to challenge. Just like now with the book. The book is a challenge, and they're asking us to go and fly all over the place. And that's nice. You know, we enjoy the challenge, and it's good. You know, I could have retired as I did at 54. I was only 54 when I stepped back out of Reebok. And like I say, stepping out of a company is different from retiring. So I guess really in many ways, I never retired. It was always, let's do something. What's the next challenge? So make sure you have challenges and make sure you go for them. Don't always win, but you get up and go again.
Beautifully said, man. Tell these guys where they can connect with you, if there's anything you'd like to recommend them, and where they can, of course, get the book, which will be linked below. Well,
they can get the book on Amazon, or let me check with Julie. It's our website, jwfosterheritage.com. jwfosterheritage.com. And if they go on there, they're going to have a signed book. So if you buy it from us, you can get a signed book. Buy it from Amazon by all means, no problem. But and a lot of the major stores, they do sell it. And one of the things that we probably side to side by Shoe Dog, because that's how they put them on the stand. So, and Richard Branson, by the way, we see ourselves up there in these business people. So we feel very honoured to be amongst a lot of the big business people. But yes, at the bookstore as well, on our website or Amazon. Simple.
Everything will link below. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your story, for writing a great book, for all you've done and achieved, and for imparting your wisdom onto our audience. It's been a true privilege for me.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Joe, and thank you. It really has. We enjoy those different questions. This is the beauty of the podcast. There's, the story's the same, but the questions drag something different out of that story. So thank you for that.